Welcome to Movie Review Mom. And if you're a subscriber and you're back, yay, welcome back. Thank you. I so appreciate your support. And if you're brand new to my channel, yay, you're finally here. I'm so glad. I've been waiting for you. So, the movie I'm reviewing today is called Prize Fighter: The Life of Jem Belcher. So, this biographical film was released in theaters in July and is now available on streaming and on video on demand. So, the movie is rated R and is an hour and 47 minutes. My movie review mom grade is, wait for it. No, you don't have to wait. It's a B minus. But I don't want you to leave now that I've told you the grade. I want you to listen to why I gave it the score that I did. Okay. So I'm going to give you an overview in a nutshell, and then I'll point out things I liked and didn't like, as well as offer tips for parents, themes worth talking about, funny or interesting lines, and even recommendations for some other films that I think you'll really like if you like this one. And if you like those other ones, then I think you might like this one. All right, so let's dive in. At the top of the 19th century, pugilism, which is a fancy schmancy word that means boxing, was a sport of kings. A gifted young boxer named Jem Belcher fought his way out of poverty and into praise by becoming the youngest champion of England. The movie is based on an inspirational, true story in British sports history. The dramatic biopic was directed by Daniel Graham and written by Matt Hookings, who also stars in the movie. So that's super cool. Kind of speaks to Sylvester Stallone's early days when he was writing and starring in all of his movies. All right, so the list of things that I liked about this movie is actually pretty long. First of all, fans of boxing will definitely enjoy the action in the ring, and there is plenty of it. My husband and one of my sons love boxing, and so I think that they would really enjoy this movie too. It's the presence, really, of Russell Crowe's face on the movie poster that will grab most people's attention. He does a great job, as expected, but in fact, better than expected, in my opinion. But sadly, he's not in the movie as much as I had hoped it would be, and as much as the movie poster sort of alludes to. Still, it's fun to see him in another boxing movie ever since he starred in another boxing movie as the young boxer himself, Cinderella Man, back in 2005. Ray Winstone is another great catch for this cast. He's crusty, salty, and perfect as Jem Belcher's demanding coach. I love a good training montage, and there's a good one in this one. There needs to be. It's a sports movie, right? Fantastic soundtrack. And I think the musical score really added to the dramatic moments. It might have been a little pushing you over the edge into what you're supposed to feel category of music, but I still really enjoyed it. There are interesting characters with depth, and I always appreciate that. And it made me laugh actually twice when Jem Belcher gazes off into nothing while the music soars with emotion. And then all of a sudden, his coach slaps his face to bring him back to reality. Because I was kind of getting swept up into the music, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh, we get to read on the screen at the end of the movie the rest of the story about certain characters. And I always appreciate that, especially when it's based on a true story. I think that I definitely enjoyed this a lot more than most critics for some reason. The movie isn't perfect, but it's not as terrible as some of the scores are that I'm seeing across different websites and YouTube channels. So there were, however, a few things that I didn't like. First of all, the transition from Jem Belcher as a child to an adult happened in a split second. You couldn't hear my snap, could you? Now, I know that happens a lot in movies, but the editing from scene to scene was super abrupt, and it is in few other places as well. Some of the extras in the movie and the cast are terrible. And so I kept wondering, why does the camera keep going back to those particular people who were like hey, and the cheering crowd scenes. And then there's this scene with some topless women for no apparent reason. And of course, the camera keeps going back to those topless women. I'm just like, it doesn't add anything to the story. Stop it. Some of the details of Jem Belcher's life aren't actually accurate, I found out. For example, he never really met his grandfather, who was also a well known boxer at the time. And that's the character that Russell Crowe plays. And then some of the details of boxing history are also incorrect. So if that kind of stuff drives you nuts, then you may not want to watch this movie. There are some Hollywood liberties taken with the story and that kind of thing. It's based on a true story. There's also something kind of off with the lighting the whole time. I'm not even quite sure exactly how to describe it. Look at the trailer. And if the trailer makes you kind of go, huh? Then you might want to skip the movie. But if you're like, no, it's totally fine, then you'll probably be totally fine with it. And I wasn't bothered by it, but I did recognize it. And then the final fight scene is filled with boxing tropes that we have seen years ago in all of the Rocky movies. Now, of course, there's a formula to the Rocky movies, which is what made that franchise so popular and successful. And of course, that formula, the sports movie formula, has been replicated hundreds of times in other movies. So some people are criticizing this movie for that. And I kind of felt like, well, because of that formulaic presentation or telling of the story, it's predictable somewhat. I mean, there are a few little things I didn't quite expect, but the general storyline, I knew where it was going, basically. And so it didn't bother me so much. But again, if that kind of thing bothers you, then you might want to step away. All right, let me give you some tips for parents. There is profanity and a lot of F-bombs. So much blood, lots of violent boxing and fighting. A man licks blood, in fact, to show how tough he is. And I was like, ugh. Lots of alcohol and drunk people. One of the characters describes champagne as, quote, something special from the Antichrist in France. End quote. That one made me laugh out loud. Cockfighting is shown. An unmarried man and an unmarried woman are seen tumbling in bed, and then a different woman. And then we also see an unmarried man go back doors quite aggressively with a woman. And again, it's like, I don't have to see that to understand he's kind of a womanizer, and that made me not like him and not root for him. So maybe that's true. Maybe they're just going off of history and that's what he was like, in which case I still don't have to see it. I can see two people in bed and, and that's it. And I know what happened. Then again, the movie is rated R. So you're probably going, come on, grow up. That's the mom in me. It's movie review mom, remember? Anyway, some of the themes that are illustrated very well are family, legacy, discipline, respect for athletes, respect for each other as athletes. And there was a moment that I was like, oh, and I loved it. And it showed respect for the years of dedication that would bring those athletes to that level of championship, really. The art of sports, money and prestige, and of course, power and control, which are results of money most of the time. All right, so I always write down funny lines and interesting lines and share them with you so that you can kind of get a taste for the movie. I have them all on my written review at moviereviewmom.com, so you can check them out there. I'll share just a couple of them with you right now. Actually, I've got a long list. Let's see, which one do I want to share? Okay, well, here's Jack Slack. He is the grandfather played by Russell Crowe, and he's talking to his grandson and giving him advice when he's a little boy, and he says, he's getting, the little kid's getting bullied, and he says, violence is as much about taking pain as it is inflicting it. And I was like, well, that's good advice, but this kid is pretty little. And I'm like, my husband would always try to toughen up our boys when they were little. And I'm like, they're just little boys. again, the mother coming out in me. And of course, he knew better. We actually signed them up for karate and boxing, even. And what's interesting is I don't know if they carried themselves differently because of that. They never, ever got bullied. And so I don't know, again, if that was just sort of a silent inner self-confidence, knowing they could protect themselves, and it showed in the way they carried themselves. I don't know. But I do recommend giving your boys, especially, the ability, the skills, the confidence to protect themselves, not to be seeking aggression, but to know that they could protect themselves and their loved ones if they needed to. Okay, another line. Okay, here's another one by Jack Slack, played by Russell Crowe. And again, he says this advice to his grandson: when your grave's filled and your flesh rots away, all you have is your name. And that's kind of another running theme throughout, is the name of this family, and how the mother is so angry with the son because she's like, you're just gracing our family name just like your grandfather did. And yet, he's trying to make his family's name a well-respected name, and things happen, and I don't want to give away everything. All right. And then the last line I'll share with you is Lord Rushworth. He's played by Martin Sokas. And he says, when opportunity knocks, one must answer. And of course, he says that with the British accent. Okay, so before I go, let me give you a recommendation for 3 movies that are boxing greats that I think you'll really enjoy. One is starring Russell Crowe as the young boxer, Cinderella Man. And some will say that it is the ultimate boxing movie, that it's so well made, so well filmed, so well acted. It's great. So check that out if you haven't seen it. Of course, Rocky would be the all-time classic for me, I think. But here are a couple of other ones. One is called The Fighting Preacher. And I thought of this one because it's actually fairly clean and not super bloody. It's old-fashioned, back in the 1800s, early 1900s, and a boxer who tries to use boxing for good. Anyway, check that one out. It's actually very sweet and based on a true story. And then the last one is Creed. So if Rocky seems too old school for you, check out the Creed movies. Of course, it's a continuation of the Rocky story, but newer, updated, great acting, really great, passionate boxing movies. So check all of those out. All right, that's it for my review. I hope that if you watch this movie that you do enjoy it as much as I did. And thank you again so much for supporting me. Visit me on my Facebook group called Movie Review Mom, and run over to Instagram. And if you feel like it, go over to Patreon and check out some of the gifts that I have waiting for you. All right, have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.